Hi everyone, it's Blair. Give you guys a chance to connect. I'm Blair Stalker and of Handmade, and we are going to stitch the third pattern. My hair's doing something crazy, for our Wisecraft Stitch Along project, which is a set of Sashiko coasters. So if you are just joining us, this is the third coaster, and we've done two other coasters that I have stitched on Facebook Live, and I'm going to be uploading all of the videos to my YouTube channel. You can also watch the replay within the Wisecraft Quilts group. In order to ask questions or anything like that, you need to be a member of the group. But we've been having a good time, and thank you guys for joining me live, and let me know that you're out there. Thank you guys for joining me on the replay, and hopefully I have covered everybody's questions. And hi Sharon, thanks for joining, and I'll give everybody a few minutes to join. I just literally walked in the door. I was out at my other job today and just walked in the door. That's why we had to start a few minutes early, or excuse me, a few minutes late. So I'm just kind of chilling out. Happy Friday, Mary Beth. Thank you for joining. So I'll show everybody what the PDF template looks like. This is what we're stitching tonight. This is, I chose these kind of based on how difficult I thought they were. And I don't know if everybody would agree, but hello. Thanks for joining, guys. But this one is my absolute favorite. The one we did last night is a close second, but this one is my absolute favorite. And this is the asanoha, which is the hemp leaf. So it's sort of a stylized hemp leaf, but you will see this pattern a lot. It's very classic Sashiko. And what's interesting is that a lot of times you will see these little hemp leaves squished down like short and stout. You'll see them stretched out thin. A lot of people like to play with proportions. Hello Rosalie, hello Michelle, hello everybody. Thanks for joining. So this one is my favorite, and what I like about it is that, like the other ones, the pattern emerges slowly. We're not stitching the individual leaves as you could imagine. We are stitching, hi Daphne, we're stitching long, vertical, horizontal, and diagonal lines. So we're going to get as much of this one stitched as we possibly can tonight, and hopefully we can get a lot of it stitched. This one takes a little bit longer than the one that we did last night, but I'm going to have you on your way. And what I thought I would do tonight, and this one, or today, depending on where you are, if you're in Australia, I thought I would use the longer needle tonight, since we are doing long straight lines, and we haven't actually used the long needle tonight. And I would also use the palm thimble, because there were some questions about the palm thimble and the longer needle. So I thought it would be kind of cool if I demonstrated how to use it. So I've got my leather palm thimble on. And if you ordered a kit from me, this leather palm thimble is in your kit. And if you're going to be doing any sort of creative mending or clothing repair or anything like that, this is really invaluable, and I will show you why tonight. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to flip the camera around. Give me just a moment. While I adjust here. Friday night here at the Stalker household. There are people ordering pizza upstairs, I think. here we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me get this all stabilized. Hi, Grace. Hi, everyone. Okay. So, as I said, tonight we're going to stitch up the hemp flower. And it's one of my favorites, and I thought it would be fun to show you how to do this. All right. My husband's kind of being a smart aleck here. Sorry, you guys, I'm just having there we go, having some adjustment issues. Okay. Hi, Lucy. Sorry, technical issues with my camera here. All right, I think I got it now. Sorry about that. Okay. Hi, Michelle. Okay, so here we have our template that we're going to stitch tonight. And I'll go over the supplies that you need. And I'll also mention again, we do have Sashiko kits in my shop. There's a link below if you are interested in these. There are still some available. Not a lot, but a few. And tonight, I have my cloth here that I've been stitching my coasters on. First coaster, second coaster. I'm going to choose one of these parts for the third coaster. I've got a piece of the carbon paper. I've got my snips, a ruler, something to cut out the pattern with, and a ballpoint pen, some tape. And as I said tonight, I'm going to use the long Sashiko needle, and just for reference sake, this is about 3 inches long. I'm sorry, 2 inches long, so it's pretty long. And my thread here. So let's get started. Let me get some light going here. This. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut out my pattern again. Hopefully everybody was able to download the pattern. There's a link to download it below this video. So I'm going to choose one of these areas, and I can still sort of see my crease that I folded in last night. So what you're going to want to do if you're using the Sashiko fabric that I sent to you is you're going to want to make sure that you're centering your pattern up and down and side to side. You want a 1/2 inch of space between the pattern above and this one, and that's really important so that you have room to cut them out later, because they need a 1/4 inch all the way around them. So I'm just going to tape this down. And actually, I'm going to line this up at the top here so that I'm sure I have it right. Okay. And as you can imagine, this pattern is pretty easy to trace. So with my ballpoint pen, I'm just going to trace out the lines. And what I was going to mention, so there is a couple things to remember here where these little shapes all converge into this little circular area right here. We are going to have an open all of those stitches are all going to come together. And hi, Tamara. So all of those, we'll get to that when we start to stitch. But to remind me, I think what I'm going to do is just kind of skip over this one little area here just to remind myself. But you could just as easily trace over it too. So I just didn't quite mark through that little area where all of those lines converge. So this pattern is just like the other ones that we've done in the fact that there are no, the lines really don't touch, or excuse me, the stitches really don't touch each other. But I thought this one was a little bit trickier just because there seems to be more to do. Hi, Christine. All right, so I'm gonna, and this is when it's really helpful to have a ballpoint pen so you can see where you've already traced. So let me know who's actually stitching with me tonight and who's watching. I'm always curious. All right. And then get the diagonal lines. I'll do these all going one way. Yeah, so a lot of you are watching, you know, I do that too. I tend to watch first and then do afterwards, maybe watch again while I do the actual stitching. It's usually easier that way. There's a diagonal line. Oops, I forgot one of the... Okay. So now I just need to get these lines, these zigzaggy lines. And so I'm just going to draw those in. I think I can get those pretty straight. Oops, I forgot another one. Another vertical line here. Every time I trace this pattern, I just like lose track of the lines. So that's why it's really helpful to have a colored pen that you can see when you've finished. It's even kind of meditative to trace these lines in. All right. Almost done. So I've really loved seeing everybody's work in the group, all of the ones that you have stitched. It's been really a treat to see that you've tried it and they all look really great. I'm very impressed. I mean, it's a fun technique, and once you learn it, you've kind of got it. You kind of know the steps, and you can sort of take it and do with it what you will. You can repair clothes, you can sew it onto really anything. A pillow, the bottom of a pair of curtain panels, I mean, all sorts of stuff. Could be really fun. Last little bit. All right, so I'm going to double check, make sure I've got everything traced. I'm going to check my lines. It looks really good. Okay. For this one, I would also recommend that you leave that pattern close by your template, because you look at it closely while you're stitching it, and it can really start to play tricks on your mind. So we'll keep that close by so that we can see. This one, it does look involved. It's not really involved as much as you think, and we'll start stitching it, and I think that you'll see. So like I said, tonight, just to give you an idea, I'm going to wear my palm thimble. And for those of you who don't have the kit or the leather palm thimble, or are curious about what this is, there's some little divots that you can see inside of this. These are adjustable, really comfortable to wear. And these work in partnership with these long Sashiko needles. So in the needle kit or the needle set in the kits that I have, there is a long one and a short one. And the short one looks like this, and the long one is about 2 inches long, and it works with the palm thimble, and I'm going to show you how tonight. Even though this piece is still really small and we don't necessarily need the palm thimble, I'm going to show you how it works so that you'll be able to use it. All right, so I'm going to thread up my needle with my Sashiko thread. And for this particular pattern, what I do is I start with these horizontal lines. So let's do those first, and I'll start up here with the first horizontal line from the top. And what's really great about having this long needle is that you can stack stitches all the way across the entire row onto your needle. So I'm going to show you, it's the same way that we did it the other night. We sort of pleated and brought the fabric to the needle versus taking the needle all the way through. And remember, like I said, we're going to leave the center of these little flowers empty. We're going to make sure that our stitches go up to them, but don't go through them. So see, I'm going to make sure that that stitch goes underneath that flower, or excuse me, the center of that flower, and then I'm going to come out on the other side of that little center and keep going. And as you pleat the fabric onto the needle, you will see if your stitches are fairly consistent and even. And if you don't like it, you can just pull it back. You can pull your needle back and you can start those stitches again. So for instance, I think that needs to be a little bit shorter. So then I'm going to go underneath. That one is a little, my stitches are smaller tonight. It's really funny. Sometimes they're a little bit longer. Hopefully you guys can see. And skip that little center, flower center. and make sure that I come out right at the tip there, that I end my stitch right at the tip. So see how I've got all of those stitches on that needle? That's the benefit. Now, if I were stitching, if this were stacked on here and I were stitching through several layers, here's where your palm thimble comes in. You would hold this area kind of securely, then you're going to take your palm thimble and you're actually going to push the needle through. Now, of course, we're only going through one layer, so you're not having to push through a lot. And then you're going to wiggle that into place. So as you can see, my stitches aren't exactly even, but I'm going to go with it because I think that's okay. So now I'm going to go let's see, you're holding it right under something square, which is white and black. Huh. Maybe I just need to move it. I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that is. Maybe that's better. Okay. Let me know if that's better, Rosalie. Okay. So now we're just going to go to the very next line, the straight line, which is right through here. I'm going to start at the end. And actually, I take that back. I'm going to start a little tiny bit after the very end, because the very end of that pattern is actually part of a flower center. So I don't know if you can see that. Maybe you can see it right here. It's going to be part of a flower center. So I'm going to start just a little ways away from that very end. And of course, you're going to leave a little slack back here, just like we did before. So I'm leaving a little bit of slack. And then we're going to stack these stitches on here. Now, let me show you how you would do this if you're stitching through a lot of layers, if you're using your long needle and your palm thimble. Let me show you how you would do that. You would hold your needle just like this. The top right corner, what is that in the top right corner? Let's see. There we go. I think I got it. Let me know if I've got it. I think I've got it. So what we're going to do is hold your thimble, or excuse me, hold your needle like this. And as you can see, my needle is right there on that divot, right there. And that's just to protect your finger. So now what I'm going to do is go through and start stacking those stitches, holding my needle like that. So it's a little different than we would hold a regular embroidery type of needle. I'm going to make sure you guys can see. I want to add some light. Hopefully this will help. Okay. So I'm just going to not count my stitches, but I'm just being aware of how my stitches are looking. I'm like pleating them on the fabric. And I'm just going to stitch this and let you guys look. And if you've got questions or if you can't see or anything like that, just let me know. So you can see I've still got my needle sort of tucked in near my palm thimble. And as I said, I'm only stitching through one thickness, but if you were stitching through multiple thicknesses, it would be a lifesaver to have this to push your needle through. See how that just sort of pushes through? So that's when that comes in really handy. So the last few stitches here, going to pull it through. I do kind of, we were talking last night about how I kind of flip it over. I do kind of flip it over. I guess it's probably, I flip it over to the back when I'm pulling my stitches through because I don't want it to tangle or get tangled up. So maybe that's why I do that. I don't know. So I still have some thread left. So I'm going to try going down one of these diagonal sides. And so I'm going to do it exactly the same way, avoiding the center of the little leaves or flowers, and just being aware of my stitches and how many approximately I need in each little section. All right, so I got that one done. So yes, Michelle, the longer needle would work for quilting or for borrow or any kind of mending. It would not necessarily work for thicker threads because you're going to be using, I mean, hypothetically, you're going to be using the same, it's got the same eye. So if you can get the thread through it, then you'd be okay. But it's not necessarily for thicker threads, if that answers your question. Now, one thing I wanted to bring up is that right here, I'm looking at the back of my work, right here where I turned that sharp corner. There's the front. On the back, just like we left slack when we carried our thread, you need to leave a little bit of slack in the corners. And again, that was for the exact same reasons that we left slack in our other ways. It's just to help with the tension. Imagine if this was being worn and the movement, you would want a little bit of slack because you don't want your threads to break. So let me show you how that looks. And if you stitch a row and you don't have slack, it's very easy to go back and use the eye of your needle and just sort of gently tease those out to give yourself a little bit more slack. Let me know if that makes sense. I'm actually going to end this one and start another thread. So I've got my threads. I'm going to pull a new one out. And make a knot. And let's see, I think I'm going to do some more diagonal lines. So I think I'll start with this one here. Actually, I think I'll start with this little tiny one here and then turn a corner and go back up that way. And I'm going to try to make my stitches a little bit more uniform. When I was stitching the Borrow quilt in my book, I did use the palm thimble. I've never been able to use any sort of thimble in my work ever. I actually use Band-Aids because I cannot get used to a thimble. And this one is so comfortable, sometimes I wear it all day. So I'm about to turn this corner here. So what I'm going to do is just turn it to the back, and I'm just going to tease this little thread out a little bit just to give a little tiny bit of slack. And then I'm going to keep going. I'm going to go up this diagonal line here. So I don't know if you all are familiar, or, you know, are thimble users of any sort, but if you are, maybe you have a secret you could share with me as far as other thimbles, because I have no luck with them. I found those tips that you can stick on the end of your finger. I've used some of those, but I have not been able to use a traditional thimble. It just does not work for me. Oh, hi, Greg. Daphne's husband, Greg, is watching too. Let's see, I'm going to try to fit 2 little stitches in this area here. Let's see how it does. Oh, it's not too bad. So again, you can see I've got all my stitches stacked on this long needle, and I'm kind of using the fabric to bring it up to the needle itself versus Angela's used a leather needle. Yeah, I think that leather needles would be like the closest that I could actually use. So I'm gonna see how it's a little bunched here. What you do is you just take your thimble, I'm sorry, the thimble talk, the eye of the needle, and you're just gonna pull some threads out here, because you definitely want to leave a noticeable little loop down there. And it's pretty easy to tease out. And it really does make a ton of difference in just having your fabric flat. So I'm going to hold that in place. There's my little loop there, you can see. Yeah, so Michelle uses those little pink silicone things that go over your finger, and those do, I've seen a lot of people use those. I think those are pretty good. Those work pretty well. Okay, so now I'm going to do another sharp turn, and I'm going to go this way. So do you see what I'm doing? As I start my thread, I'm just finding a diagonal line to connect to as I'm doing it, and then when I run out of thread, I'm doing another I'm pulling another thread and just continuing on. And this stitching, excuse me, stitching these lines this way really kind of stabilizes the fabric. And so you can imagine if you were doing these sort of long stitches or long rows of stitches on clothing or something that you were repairing, you can see where, or you can imagine where it would stabilize the fabric and sort of make the patch nice and flat, which is what you want. At least it does in my mind. I don't really know if that's why we're told to stitch these in straight lines, but I think that it tends to do that, at least when I've stitched this now many times, and it really just does not work as well when you try to stitch it any other way, at least with as far as the tension is concerned. All right, so got that one done. I'll pull that one through. And that one doesn't look great. That one, I'm going to pull that one out. I don't like the way that looks right there. So I'm going to pull that one out. So I pulled out just those few stitches. I'm going to rethread and try another stab at that. So Rosalie, my little, Rosalie wanted to know if I did something different to my thimble. This little elastic piece back here, I used it so much that that finally just popped off. And so I just used some Sashiko thread to hold it in place one day while I was working. That's all that is. Let's see if I can stitch this one a little bit better than I did the last time. That's good. I think that one's a little bit better. There, that's better. Okay. So then what I need to do, because again, I turned a sharp curve there, is I need to just go back and tease out a little slack. And if I had forethought and wasn't talking at the same time, I would have tried to do that before I turned my work, before I turned my line, but there we go. So there's what I have so far. So I just ended right here. So now I'm going to do this little line here. And I'm just avoiding that little center part because, again, this is the center of a flower. I don't really need to leave too much of slack right there because that's not really a sharp curve. Just maybe a little bit. Never hurts. Okay, let's see what that one looks like. All right. So now I've got this much thread left, and even though my work is on the back, I can kind of tell that I have enough to go up this diagonal line here. So I think I'm going to do that. And again, we talked about this in the last video, but when you are at a point like this, I always have one side of the stitches because they're not technically supposed to meet at the point. So I always make sure I have one side of the stitches going right into the point, and the next stitch going in the opposite direction, I would move up just a little bit, if that makes sense. So here's the point. I have this stitch going directly into the point, and then I have this one coming up away from the point a little bit with a little bit of space. And go up. And there I'm in the center of the flower, so I'm going to guess who's coming in? Gracie. Hey, Gracie. I don't like the way that looks. So I'm going to pull these out and maybe adjust a little bit. Boy, Gracie really loves these Facebook Live videos, man. She's always around. Whoops. Hey, Gracie. Okay. Here we go. One thing that I find with this Sashiko cloth that's really interesting is that if you stitch in an area that you are unhappy with and you pull the stitches out and go to restitch it, sometimes because you've made those little holes, it just tends to go right back in where you just stitched, and you feel like you can't really make it go in another way. And what I do is just kind of take my finger and just rub in that space so that the hole will go away if I have trouble with that. And the holes just usually just go right away. Valerie, I think that's true. I think she's had her dinner, Gracie, and I think she thinks I'm talking to her. And suddenly she's like super... She's a frequent visitor to the studio. I'm not really sure why, but she seems to like it down here. Gracie! She usually always talks to me when I say her name. Sorry, you guys can't see that. All right. So then, and don't forget, whenever you pull it out, you give it a little wiggle, a little tug. I need to give it some slack down here in this corner. So I'm going to pull these out a little bit, because I also need to remember I've got not only the slack, but I've got a corner there that I turned. Gracie, come up. Come here. Come here. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to end that one, and we'll see where we're at. There we go. So you can see the center of the flowers starting to come together. You guys can hear, Gracie, come back. Where are you going? She wants to be on camera. I'll see if I can get a close-up of her when we're done. Or maybe I'm just more fun than the boys upstairs. You guys, I'm super excited because my daughter comes home tomorrow for the first time since she left for college. I'm really excited to see her. She's a freshman, and we've been to visit her, but she's not been home yet. And so she's home for a whole week, and I can't wait. It's nice when you have moody teenagers to suddenly miss them, if you know what I mean. All right, so I'm just going to stitch this and let you guys watch. And just keep on going. And please don't get out a grain of rice and hold it up to my stitches tonight. Because just like, you know, like knitting or crochet, you can have tighter tension when you're, you know, having an off night or stressed out or something like that. It's like, I think that the same goes for any sort of needlework. So, all right, so I just did that one, and now I'm going to do this one. And I'm going to try to hold the slack here. So Emma does do crafty things with me. She she spends probably 2 months out of the year on Halloween costumes. And this year she was the character from the movie It, the clown. And I got her 6 yards of quilting cotton in a light gray and some red yarn to make pom-poms. And she actually made her entire costume from scratch in her room using a flat iron for an iron because she didn't have an iron. Which I don't know if I could have done that, but she did it and her costume was great. I was pretty impressed. And as a matter of fact, I was so impressed. We were kind of hoping that her grades were as good as her costume because she'd spent so much time on it. And luckily, they seemed to be. So, but she sits down here and sews with me when she's working on her costumes. So we have a good time. She likes the same sorts of podcasts. Oh, what did I do? Oh, geez. I'm going to take that one out. I sewed it from the wrong side, guys. Sorry. She likes the same sort of podcast that I do, and she does not like the same sort of music that I do. But we both like scary movies, and so we'll watch scary movies down here together sometimes when we're doing sewing. But she can pull all-nighters down here. I cannot pull all-nighters anymore. I can upload a picture of her It costume into the group because it was pretty amazing. Let me try this again. So I'm going to go up that again because I actually came in from the back. So I'm going to hold my slack there in place at that little turn. Hey, Gracie. Hi. Come up. Come here. Okay. I will upload her costume because it was quite the work of art. I'm constantly amazed. And it's funny because she does not really see the excitement in quilts like I do. So our crafty worlds are very different, but the enthusiasm for both is, you know, just as strong in our respective crafts. Let me give a little bit more slack. There we go. Let's see how we're doing here. So it's looking good. We're coming together. So now we have some straight lines to do here. And I think we've done all of our diagonal lines. We're going to need to do these little lines here. So I think what I'll do is just start, rather than turn a corner, I'm going to start with a fresh length of the Sashiko thread and stitch some of the horizontal lines. So Rosalie, she hasn't decided what she wants to study yet. She is very artistic, and her art, I think, is amazing. It's a little bit dark for my taste, but she is very, very good. And so she wants to do something with art, maybe with some costume, you know, production or theater tech or something like that. But she's also interested in a lot of other things like sociology, criminology, and so she's not really sure what she wants to do. And the beauty of being at the school that she's at is that she, you know, has a chance to sort of dip her toes into all of those different things and see maybe what interests her the most. So she's got time to figure that out, which is pretty cool. But she's having a really good time. It was a tough adjustment being away from home, but she seemed to figure it out right away or soon after she got there. And she's actually taking the train, the Amtrak train, home for the first time tomorrow. So it's a lot of firsts for her, which is really exciting. So what I wanted to show you guys in this little section here, so I'm doing these vertical lines, and you will notice that in your pattern there are spaces here in the vertical lines where you actually do not stitch, and I'll show you what that means on this one. So vertical line, space, vertical line, space, vertical line, space, if you were to keep going. So in each of these little areas, you're going to still leave that slack just like you did, and carry the thread just like you did in the other coasters that we did. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to stitch and then I'm going to go back, and I am flipping my work over, and I'm going to add a little bit of slack here on all of these. As I carry my thread, and then give it a little tug and make sure everything is nice and straight. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to this next line here, if you can see that. And again, I'm going to carry my thread across this section here from the back. Again, I'm not crossing my stitches, just going around the ones I've already stitched. So there I have a little space. I'm going to go underneath that and come out on the other side. These little spaces in here are so tight that really you can only get a couple of stitches in there before you have to go under. So go under that, come out on the other side. One more. That's actually not very good. I'm going to try that one again. There we go. Okay. So wiggle that into place. Make sure I've got some slack here. Every one of those little places where I carry the thread. And there we go. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to jump over here and go and do this one here because I've got plenty of thread. So I'm going to keep on going. Hopefully all this is making sense. This pattern looks complicated, but it's not. It just has a few more lines. Let me know if it seems to make sense or if you're just totally confused by what I'm doing. I can help to clarify. There's that one. And again, I'm going to give myself some slack here. That's another thing that's great about the Sashiko fabric is that you can sort of pull these threads through pretty easily. So there's those three. I think I'm going to be out of thread here, so I'm going to grab another length of thread. I love the sound that these guys make. Yes, Rosalie, yeah, it helps to have the printed pattern nearby. It definitely helps because what's cool about this pattern, as I've said before, is it looks like a bunch of lines, nothing much happening, and suddenly everything creates this pattern that you've been working on all along that just didn't show itself. So it is good for this one to have the template nearby, just so you can sort of make sure you're forming it the right way. If I can get my needle threaded here. There we go. Make my knot. So now I'm going to continue. I've got 1, 2, 3 more of these lines. So let's get those stitched so that I can show you the little zigzaggy lines. And I have to say, my stitches are not as consistent tonight. I'm off my stitch game, but I'm going to let it, I'm going to go with it. Because the beauty of this, I think, I hope, is that that doesn't really matter in the end. So I'm going to pull these and then, of course, make sure I've got adequate slack here where I'm carrying the thread. And then I'm going to go to the next one. Again, making sure none of my stitches touch. There is a type of Sashiko that does have the stitches touching. And I do not know the name of it off the top of my head, but I have played with it and I love it. And I'm actually creating an online class that I'm offering in January. It's like a self-paced class that will allow us to dive deeper into the whole world of Sashiko and Boro and all of the different types of Japanese creative mending that there are. It's really fun and it will guide you through some projects. So I'll let you guys know. If you're interested in finding out more about that, make sure you're on my email newsletter list, which is on my blog. I don't think I put a link down below, but I will add a link because that's where I'm going to announce it first. So I figure we learned to do it in January after we have sort of cleaned up from the holiday. It might be nice to do some simple stitching and meditative handwork and make some fun things. I always like to make things for our house for the spring. When it's really just when the seasons change, but I love making stuff for our house in the spring because I don't know, it just seems like the house looks a little bit bare after the holidays when we put everything away, and it also looks it looks pretty clean, and so I'm kind of, inspired to, I don't know, make some towels, like kitchen towels and things like that. Let's straighten this back out. There we go. All right, so now I have, as you can see, all of the vertical lines stitched. And I think I have all of the horizontal lines. Yep, I've got all the verticals. So now all that's left are these little zigzaggy lines. And that's really when we're going to see the pattern emerge. So because of that, I'm actually going to start kind of in the center because I want you guys to be able to see the pattern right away. So that means I'm going to start a new thread. All right. So I'm going to start right here. I don't know if you guys can even see that. I'm going to make this a little bit more noticeable so that you guys can see what I'm stitching. So I'm going to stitch that little, can you see that now, a little zigzaggy line going through there. And I'm going to start over on this side. Doesn't matter which side, but so really nothing too much to know about the zigzaggy lines. It's not a super sharp turn that I make here, but you know, you do just sort of be aware of your slack. You don't have to leave slack like we did with the sharper curves that we did before, but you don't want your thread to bunch up, so. So the marking pen that I used, Tamara, this is just a quilter's chalk pencil, and this is, gosh, I've had this for years. Bohin, B-O-H-I-N is the brand, and it just makes a chalk line on dark fabric that you can just wipe away when you're done. There are all kinds of pencils that you can use to mark on dark fabric and on light fabric. But I like that one for darker fabrics. Let's see. Oh, bye, Daphne. Yeah, you can watch the replay anytime. Thank you for even trying to make the live ones. I know that it's not always convenient for everybody, so thank you for joining. Thank you for supporting what I'm doing and being here. I appreciate it. Sorry you have to go to work. Let's see. Okay. So, got one line there. So now I'm going to go up, and I don't know if you can see this, but I'll just outline it with my needle. I'm going to do this zigzaggy line. So these are really so small, 1 stitch per zig and 1 per zag is about all we can do. And again, you see how we've got this opening here at the center of the leaf slash flower, and I'm just going to add this right there, and then I'm going to come out over on the other side of that space. And actually, I'm going to draw a little bit here with my, because my lines are kind of disappearing and I want to be able to see them. Okay. Oops. So you can see I'm doing like one stitch for each of those because it's just a really tight little space. And after I stitch this row, I will definitely want to go back and just make sure that there is a little slack there for all of these little turns. They're not sharp turns, but it's better to have a little bit of slack, even on these little soft turns. Okay. Look at what's happening, guys. Look, we've almost got like a full star. So I'm going to turn this over. Where'd it go? Yeah. So I'm just going to go back and give a little slack here. All right, and then I think, do I have enough to go back? Yeah. All right, I'm going to go back the opposite direction. And for this little space right here, when I turn this corner, I'm definitely going to want to leave slack because that's pretty sharp. Oops. All right, you guys, look, there's our first little star. Let me rethread my needle here. So one thing I forgot to mention that it says on the PDF that, you know, I'm always so curious about traditional symbols like this and what they mean. And I guess in the area where Sashiko originated, which was in northern Japan, they did not have access to cotton. I think I mentioned that in one of the other videos, but it didn't grow well there, and so they often used hemp. So hemp was very important to their daily life, and I think it's so cool that they, you know, create these patterns based on these things like hemp. And it means it was often stitched in things like baby garments or things like that that were given as a symbol of prosperity and a good life, because it's known as a very strong plant. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I just wanted to share that while I was thinking about it. It's always fun to learn. What you realize when you sort of dive into this world is that, you know, so much of this is all intentional as far as like the patterns and the things that they use. They used what they saw around them in nature. So this was someone from long, long ago, their interpretation of what a hemp leaf looked like. Oop. We are just about to stitch our very first flower. So I'm going to remove the thread or my needle because I want to make sure. So do you see how that's coming together? You see how cool that is? And what I'm going to do is go back, of course, and check my slack, check my tension, make sure that I'm giving myself a little thread or two here. So now I'm going to do this last, this will be the last one that I do tonight, because what will happen is this will make the entire flower and our hour will be up. So I'm going to mark that in so that you can see there. So hopefully everybody can see that. It's such a pretty pattern. I just really love it. Every time I stitch a new one, I say, oh, that's my favorite. Oh, that's my favorite. Oh, this is definitely my favorite. But I really do like this one a lot. So let's get that last row stitched for tonight, and that way you guys will have seen a whole flower come together. Or I keep calling them flowers because they look like flowers to me, but I guess they're really leaves. Now, the one thing that I think would be really interesting that I haven't tried to do is stitching a pattern like this on like denim or something like that, something thicker. If somebody does that, please show us, because I know it can be done. I've seen it. However, I myself have not done it. So I'm curious if you might have to enlarge the pattern or make the little leaf flower shapes a little bit bigger. I would think you'd have to. I just don't know how you could do something this small, but I think it would be really pretty on denim. I mean, I think this sort of creative mending like this is so pretty. It almost makes you want to have like a part of, it almost makes you want to have like a rip in your jeans just so you can try to repair it with one of these really pretty stitches. Okay. So this one took a little bit longer than the one that we did last night, but it wouldn't take that much longer. All right. So there we go. There's our flower, or our leaf shape. And you can see how we have all of these stitches sort of coming together right here in the center and leaving that hole. To me, that really defines the little shape there that we're trying to get. Michelle, I think it would be gorgeous to stitch something like this on a dress. And I've actually seen Sashiko stitching like this, or like one of these patterns going across the yoke of a tunic or something, just across the entire yoke, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I can't tell you how beautiful it is. So I think that would be a great idea. So I'm going to turn the camera back around, and so there we go. We did it. I have a couple more stitches to do, or a couple more lines to do, but thank you guys so much for sticking it out with me. I hope this is a fun one for you guys to stitch, and join me for the next one, which I think is Monday night. I will put a event thing in the group so that we'll all know when it is. But we will be stitching our last pattern and join me, and then we'll turn them into coasters. All right, so any questions you have, let me know. I'm going to get all of the replays up on my YouTube channel this weekend. I promise. Now that I know how to do it, it's not a big deal. I can do it. So thank you all for joining. Thank you all for playing along with me. This is so much fun, and I absolutely love it. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all on Monday. All right, bye-bye.